but it's related to money, is the Cantillon effect. And this is something that I think that Bitcoiners do themselves a disservice by throwing out the term money printing willy-nilly as if they understand all the intricacies. And then when probed, maybe I've done this, frankly, when
Yeah.
probed, it's like, okay, it's QE, it's, they can,
Yeah.
whoever's closest to the money's figured, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You give an example in the book of sort of
Yeah.
how that might relate to, I guess, today's world, and why we might see some disillusionment amongst the population.
Hmm. Hmm.
And just talk to us a little bit about the Cantillon effect and the easiest way that you would explain it to, I use the
Yeah.
term normie as being anyone who doesn't really pay attention to Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I think the example I used in the book, because Richard Cantillon, you kind of wrote it during an era of, again, under not a gold standard, but a bimetallic standard. So gold and silver were used as money. And you can kind of think of, imagine you're running an economy based on silver. All of a sudden, ships return from South America full of boatloads of silver that have just been freshly mined. Well, the people who have that silver, they get to make choices before anyone else has felt the effects of those choices. So they could go and buy all of the scarce assets available to them at the time and sort of inject all that silver into the economy. And what is going to happen when they do that? Let's say they literally double the amount of silver in the economy, and they identify all the scarce resources in that economy, and then that's where they inject or purchase with that silver that they've just mined. Well, it's going to inflate the prices massively, and by the time that's become obvious, everyone else, you just won't see it happening. It's very non-obvious. It's very subtle, but it affects everyone. And so if you kind of think today, a commercial bank has the ability to create money, outside of central banking. So let's just keep a very basic example. Someone going to get a mortgage. And I think Saifedean uses this example in the fiat standard. That bank, let's say the house costs $1 million. Someone's borrowing 500,000, half of it. That bank is then going to create $500,000, which has now increased the money supply. That person is going to use that $500,000 and give it to the seller of the house. The seller of the house can then spend that $500,000 into the economy, and everyone's none the wiser. But that person gets to make choices before the inflationary effects of adding that $500,000 into the economy has happened. So all you kind of have to really think about when you think of the Cantillon effect is who has an unfair advantage in terms of being able to make decisions and direct capital before everyone else understands what's going on. I'm trying to think if there's a simpler way to explain it. But in reality, imagine if you could see that things were very underpriced. No, I won't do that. I'll leave it at that.
A good example of what you're talking about, basically, if I go back to sort of during COVID, and this didn't really happen here, but you had BlackRock buying up multifamily homes, and they were able to get effectively 0% interest rates because they've got so much capital and they've got so many assets under management and blah, 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 blah. The net effect is that every house in every desirable area just shot through the roof. And yeah, the best example I use is always housing here, because Australians use housing as a savings vehicle, it's got a massive monetary premium, which you mentioned in the book. And hopefully Bitcoin can suck some of that away in time. But when you've got a world where interest rates are 1 or 2%, why bother saving? And you've got inflation that's running hot. And if you've got assets, why wouldn't you just go and borrow against it and buy more property? And so we saw property prices rise by like 40% here, or 45% in Brisbane, sort of bottom to top. And I believe Canada's pretty similar. It's got a similar dynamic to Australia as well as New Zealand. The economy or people's wealth is very much tied up in their primary residence. So I sort of I go on and on about real estate quite often here, even though I'm trained in real
Yeah.
estate and all that jazz. But to me, it's the most obvious manifestation of the Cantillon effect. Because if you're an asset owner, you just got a whole lot richer, and the poor pleb who was diligently saving for their first property, it's now 40% more expensive, and they had nothing to do with it. So yeah, I think that's the unfairness inherent. Eh?
Yeah, yeah, it's really just what is outside of your control. And, if you're using a money that someone else can create at will, but you cannot, then you're always going to be subject to the whims of their decisions or just market cycles. So I think that's a big appeal to me of Bitcoin, is just being able to exit that whole problem.
Yeah.
Um, of, yeah.